Let's talk about some burning questions. We're going to go to the NFC South first, down to the state of Louisiana, New Orleans in particular. And they've had a lot going on the last few weeks. We heard, so you and I were at the Colorado showcase a month ago or so now. Days after that, we found out that Derek Carr's shoulder injury could keep him out for the course of the season. And then we found out over the weekend that Derek Carr is done forever. He is retired from football because of that shoulder injury, played 11 years. One of the most amazing facts that I read this morning, only 15 people in the history of organized football have made more in the NFL than Derek Carr. That's how much money this man has made. Shout out to Derek Carr, who at 34 is going to have a nice little basket of retirement there. But now the issue for the Saints is this. They drafted Jake Haener 2 years ago. They drafted Spencer Rattler last year. They drafted Tyler Shough, 40th overall, a few weeks ago. That's their primary question. But I'm going to get to your burning question before we follow it with mine. Did the abrupt retirement of Derek Carr catch them off guard? Because they draft quarterbacks every year. That said, I don't know if Tyler Shough was penciled to be the day one starter when they drafted him.
No, and I think there was a level of they knew it could possibly happen, but weren't quite sure. And we've talked about it on this podcast several times about how the Saints always draft a year ahead of a need, but I'm pretty sure they didn't think it was going to be this much of a need this soon. So I'm not quite sure where they were in terms of knowing whether Derek was going to play or not. I think there were some rumors going around when he first announced the shoulder injury that there was a chance that he would not play for the Saints in terms of just being on the field, but he would still be under contract with the Saints. And then as we saw this weekend, he's no longer under contract with the Saints because he retired.
So Kellen Moore is the new head coach there, obviously offensive-minded. OC came over from Philadelphia and Dallas before that. So here's the question. I don't know if it would have changed their opinion had they known 100% whether Derek Carr was retiring or not in terms of taking Tyler Shough 40th overall, the third quarterback off the board. But Jake Haener and Spencer Rattler went 0-7 last year in the starts they had to make once Derek Carr got hurt. And now it's Tyler Shough. I would imagine, Rand, if you're the GM talking with the head coach and the offensive staff, it's a wide open competition. But at the end of the day, this feels like a pretty tough spot to be in if you're trying to compete in that division.
Absolutely. Not only if you're trying to compete in the division, but you're trying to compete with a first-time head coach, not just a new head coach, but a first-time head coach, an offensive-minded head coach. So I think that changes things. And I think if they had more of an inkling, right, I think they were pretty set with where they were taken in the top 10. But I think you would have saw them make more of an effort to probably trade up ahead of the Giants to take Jackson Dart, because there was some love there between the organization and Jackson Dart with how they showed up at his pro day. So I think if they had more of an inkling headed into it, they probably would have swung a little bit bigger to get a guy like Jackson Dart in the first round.
So one of the teams we talked about last week during the AFC part of this conversation with the Cleveland Browns, they have 5 quarterbacks on the roster. I read a headline yesterday. I didn't read the article, just perusing as I was doing yard work, and it turns out you were sitting on your deck drinking lemonade, but that's a different conversation. Would the Saints want to call Andrew Berry and the Browns about one of their 4 quarterbacks? Deshaun Watson's not going to play. One of their 4 quarterbacks. Would that be something that might be a consideration?
For me, I'd say no, just because of the simple fact, and let's be honest here, like the Browns have one quarterback that we know is not going to play in Deshaun Watson. Then you have 2 rookie quarterbacks. And let's be honest, will Kenny Pickett or Flacco move the needle for New Orleans that much, right? So let's see, and I'm saying we as the Saints, let's see what we have in these 3 young quarterbacks, and that'll give us a more clear picture of what our future looks like.
Yep. I think we're different minds about this, but you can tell me for certain. I like Spencer Rattler a lot. That's no surprise to anyone that follows this podcast. I think I probably would have had him rated higher than Tyler Shough had they come out in the same class. Now, Spencer Rattler's 5'11", 6 feet, ran a 4.9 or whatever, so he's not the athlete that Tyler Shough is. He does have a big arm. He's played a lot of football. There is the maturity stuff early on in his career. Does one of those players move the needle more than the other in terms of, obviously, at 6'5", Tyler Shough looks the part, but in terms of a player you feel more comfortable with, because they're probably the same age?
Well, here's the beauty for Kellen Moore. He's never had any of them. right? So the other two, and Jake Hayner and Spencer Rattler, that's more of, Mickey Loomis and Jeff Ireland, those guys having more of a feel for him. And one thing we know about Tyler Shough, that this is a Kellen Moore pick, because this is a guy that's coming in under his regime. So I would be more inclined to, let's see where Tyler Shough is. Now, he's a rookie, yes, but like we've talked about numerous times on this show, that he's 25, 26, 27 years old. So he's a little bit older and should be better equipped to handle some of this initial pressure.
Tyler Shough's so old, we don't actually know how old he is. That's how old Tyler Shough is. One other thing, this was my burning question, because I wanted to get away from the Derek Carr stuff because I knew we would talk about that. But one of their first pick was Kelvin Banks Jr., 9th overall, the left tackle out of Texas. And unofficially, he's penciled in as a starter at left tackle. That allows Tully Fuaga, last year's first-round pick, to go back to the right side. This offensive line is actually in pretty good shape on paper at the very least. That's great news for whoever the quarterback ends up being. But I wanted to ask you about Kelvin Banks Jr., and you saw this last year with J.C. Latham. You got to be careful about putting too much expectations on a rookie starting offensive lineman, I would imagine, especially one playing left tackle. Is that fair to say?
Oh, absolutely. And this is one of the conversations I had with JC very early on, letting him know you're extremely talented. Everyone knows that. But now you're going against grown men who have mortgages to pay. They got private school to pay for. They're married. They got kids. They're not going to allow themselves to get pumped by a 21-year-old kid. Right. And so now it comes into, you have to study opponents. You're going to have to know, because this game now is about technique. Everybody's an athlete just about at this level. So now it becomes about technique and fundamentals. And that's what these young tackles have to get used to.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy to think that the Saints now have the biggest looming question at quarterback, because the next team we're going to talk about in Charlotte, North Carolina, the Carolina Panthers. 12 months ago, we didn't know what Bryce Young's future was going to look like because new coach Dave Canales was just coming in. 2 weeks into the season, he got benched. And then we figured, well, he will never play in Carolina again. And the next thing you know, Andy Dalton gets in a fender bender, and Bryce Young comes out like he's been taken back to Alabama the way he was slinging it. So your burning question for the Carolina Panthers now going into year 3 with Bryce, year 2 with Dave Canales. How much growth do we expect to see from Bryce in year 3 and year 2 with Canales? And I'll just say this. Canales was effective in Seattle. He was extremely effective in Tampa Bay. And it was a little rocky early on there at Carolina for, I'm sure, numerous reasons. But it feels like he and Bryce are now on the same page, and they've added, of course, Ted McMillan, their first-round pick, to help Bryce out.
Yeah, and I think it's going to be a good year for Bryce, just from the standpoint of now he can eliminate some of the thinking, right? So last year, it's a new system. It's your second year in the league, your second offensive system that you're trying to learn. And now you spent another year in the system. You know the nuances of the offense and what it's expected of you. So now you can instinctually go out and play, and you don't have to think your way through it. So I expect him to have a big jump. And like you said, to take Teteroa McMillan and give him another weapon, to go with Xavier Legette and the guys that they've added in his backfield. I expect him to make a big jump offensively.
Hey, we always talk about last year's quarterback class compared to this year's quarterback class. You and I, with different organizations at the time, made the quarterback pro day circuit for Bryce and CJ and Will Levis and Anthony Richardson 2 years ago. If Bryce Young were in this quarterback class, and you have to erase the last 2 years just going on his Alabama tape, where would he have ranked for you?
He would still be number one. And I think
okay.
a lot of it has to do with just the team, and look how he uplifted that team at Bama. So I think he would still be number one. I think it would be more of a question just because of Cam's physical skill set and Shadour's ability to process and throw the ball accurately. But I still think in the end, you look at the totality of the talent that was around him and what he was able to do, I think Bryce would still be number one.
I appreciate your honesty, because our buddy Pete Prisco has been anti-Bryce since day one. He's also anti-Russell, and I always come back to this theory. Since Pete is, pushing 5'2", he's always down on the guys that he's closest to in height for some reason. He needs to have some solidarity with those young men. But here's my follow-up question, and this is my burning question in particular. Can Bryce be consistent enough to make the Panthers hover around 500, maybe even get a little north of 500 by the time it's all said and done?
I'll go out on a limb and say yes. And I'm going to tap into my inner Ryan Wilson and love up everybody right now, because everybody's 0-0, nobody's lost a game. But again, another year in the system and the weapons that they're adding around him, they have shown a commitment to make this pick right. and to give him everything he needs to be successful. So as long as those guys are able to step up around him, they're able to protect him, I think he gives you a good chance to be around 500.
Yeah, and they made a lot of moves in the draft and free agency to bolster that defense when needed to happen. We talked about Ted McMillan. Last year, they got Xavier Legette. They got Jimmy Horn as well, the Colorado wide receiver to add to Bryce's arsenal as well. So the opportunity is there, no doubt about it. All right, let's take a quick break. When we come back, we'll hit the rest of the NFC South, and we'll make our way to Atlanta and start the conversation with the Falcons. We'll do that right after this break. All right, Rand, going to make our way to Atlanta, but first, we're going to stop off. I got to go to the HR because producer Sharon over here embarrassing me during the break. Didn't ask me if I ever played Tecmo. He asked you, so I asked him why he didn't say that. Just because I was never an athlete. Okay, that's fine, Sharon. I'm making a note here, and you'll be getting a call from HR because number one, I was the quarterback and the center on my sixth grade football team. I did both, not at the same time. Number one. Number two, hit a home run first at bat in Little League. Don't worry that I got called out because I missed home plate because I was so excited, but that's not the point. But I got some skills. So let's just leave it. Let's move on to Atlanta. Man, Sharon done rocked my world. All right. Let's go to Atlanta. A team full of athletes, as it turns out. And this question, I wonder if I can beat this young man in a foot race, speaking of athleticism. But it's a good burning question because he has been off my radar. It's your burning question, Rand. What's next for Kirk Cousins? Now, Pittsburgh still seems to think, according to reports, that Aaron Rodgers is going to make his way to Western PA at some point. We have yet to see that. It feels like the musical chairs have stopped for Kirk Cousins in Minnesota, for example. I don't know what else is out there. But let's circle back. Is Kirk Cousins going to be an option in New Orleans? And if so, how high is that price going to be because it's inside the division?
One thing's for certain, two things for sure is I don't think Arthur Blank would ever trade any Falcon player to the New Orleans Saints within the division. I just don't see that happening. I'll say this. One thing we know for sure is that Kirk Cousins is going to make $27.5 million a year. No matter who's paying it, he's going to make it, right? Kirk has a way of making his money, so shout out to Kirk. But I think this could be a situation where after all the offseason fodder of where is he going to end up, who's going to trade for him, unless something happens in August or even at the trade deadline, we could very well see him suit up in the Atlanta Falcons uniform again this year.
So as a GM, let me ask you this. And Kirk, by all accounts, is a great dude, great teammate. Obviously, our buddy Rick Spielman signed him to the first guaranteed deal back in the day, 3 years, $80+ million, and only had glowing things to say about him. But is that going to – how do you sort through whether that's going to be an issue in the locker room now that this is Michael Penix Jr.'s team?
I think in this day and age, I don't think it will matter much. Now, the only question that'll come into play is if Michael Penix isn't playing well. And will he be on a short leash and allowed to play? Will he be given the time to play through some of these things? Or will they have the quick hook and pull and put Kirk in? Because they do have a team that they're expecting to compete for the division championship and to make the playoffs. So it's just a matter of how much leeway are they going to give Michael Penix Jr. if he's not playing well.
And because it's the same staff, the same OC, Zach Robinson, obviously the same head coach in Raheem Morris, you would imagine that leash might be a little longer because the whole point was Kurt was playing so poorly last year coming off that Achilles that their hand was almost forced to bring in the rookie, the guy that they drafted, the guy that they clearly liked, and what was at the time considered a surprise pick, 8th overall. Let me ask you this, as Titans GM, after you guys had taken J.C. Latham, were you shocked to see a few picks later Michael Penix Jr. go to Atlanta?
Actually, no, because unlike you, I listen to our friend JJ and see what he actually puts out and pay attention.
He did say that. That's right.
But no, in all honesty, we had been hearing for some probably a week or so prior to the draft that there was a real chance that Michael Penix would be in play for them. And we had on intel that it came down to Penix and Latu, the rusher from UCLA, as their two options there. And so we kind of figured that going in. But we'd already selected and we were on the press conference circuit, at that point. So it was free for all after that.
It's interesting you mentioned Latu as a possibility. 8, he didn't go until 15, just to goes to show you that the run on offensive players in last year's draft class, 1 through 14, I believe it was, were all offense, and then Latu came out 15th to the Colts. It's interesting that you mentioned edge rusher, because my burning question was about the 2 edge rushers that the Falcons took in the first round this year. Last year, they took Braylon Trice on day 2. He suffered an injury in August, so he didn't play at all. He'll be back, hopefully healthy and ready to go. But they also got Jalen Walker, and then they traded back into the first round for James Pierce Jr., and then in the third round, they got safety Xavier Watts out of Notre Dame. So 2 edge rushers, one from Georgia, one from Tennessee, and then the safety from Notre Dame. And my burning question for you, Rand, is will those 3 picks, in addition to all the players they have coming back, will that finally transform this defense into something other than what was honestly been mediocre or worse in recent years, especially given now that Raheem Morris in year 2 is a defensive guy? Is he going to get those guys ship shape and make things easier for Michael Penix Jr.?
I believe so. And I believe this is why you take a rusher at 15 and then you jump back in and give up a future 1 to get another rusher. And I, for one, I love this draft class. Obviously, we're talking about the 2 guys at the top, but then Xavier Watts and Billy Bowman. Billy Bowman, I was a big fan of his. And I just love this draft class because it fits Raheem Morris and who he is as not only as a coach, but as a person. So you're going to see this Atlanta Falcons defense flying around. I think they have the makings to be a really good defense. And if you look at what they've done in their time at the Rams, they played a lot of young guys, early, regardless of where they took them, and allowed them to grow and mature. So that's what you're going to see out of this Atlanta Falcons defense this year.
Yeah, it feels like we talk about this division as being one of the weakest in the league, and this year it might be different. It feels like things are starting to come together. The Saints obviously have to figure some things out at the quarterback position, but this Falcons team feels like it's turning the corner. But you give me a hard time. Hope springs eternal in May during rookie minicamps, and that's where we are. That's the stage of the process we're in. But I think they've done the right things, the Atlanta Falcons, to put themselves in a position to have success. There are no lingering questions. There's no sort of Pittsburgh Steelers, who's going to be the quarterback type stuff going on there. So that's a good start. All right, let's make our way down to Tampa Bay. A team that perennially wins the division, and every year, this time of year, we just think that someone else is going to win the division, and Tampa Bay just does it. Baker Mayfield succeeded Tom Brady, and we often talk about, Brian Griese succeeded John Elway, I believe, and that's a lot of pressure on him. Didn't work out as well for him. Tommy Maddox, I think, was in that same conversation as well. Baker Mayfield, no such concerns, because Baker Mayfield does not care about anything except slinging it. But your burning question is an interesting one, and one that's similar to mine. They drafted Emeka Egbuka in the first round as sort of the eventual Michael Evans / Chris Godwin replacement when they get to that point. But your burning question is, you feel like they have enough, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers do, to win the NFC South, but can they make a deep run in the playoffs? And that's a fair question. Is your bigger concern on offense or defense, or is it a combination of the 2?
I think it's a combination of the 2. And we know what they have at the receiver position if everyone's healthy. But you're still at the behest of Baker Mayfield and which Baker Mayfield shows up on that particular day. Is it the guy that's, playing out of his mind, making plays, extending the ball downfield and making explosives, or is he the guy that becomes a turnover machine? For one, I think they will be in the running to win the NFC South again. However, I just don't think they have enough just in the organization right now to make that deep playoff run and compete with the teams like Detroit and the Rams and Philly. I just don't think they have that. So that was why I posed the question, just to, maybe I'm wrong, maybe I'm off, and have you correct me for feeling this way.
Well, here's my burning question. It digs down just a little deeper. Have the Bucs done enough to remain the best team in the division? Because I just talked about the Falcons. The Panthers feel like a little upstarty, if you will. Defense, we got to sort that out. I think Bryce Young hopefully continues to progress. We don't know about the Saints. But is Tampa Bay do they have enough? Have they done enough to maintain that hold as the best team in that division?
I think the Falcons are going to push them, because regardless of the record in this division, it's really predominantly been a 3-team race: the Falcons, the Saints, and the Bucs. And on any given Sunday, because of that rivalry, these games can go any way. So I think the Falcons are going to really push Tampa Bay this year and have a chance to dethrone them and become the NFC South champions.
And I would argue that the biggest issue, and Tampa Bay, fans get angry when we don't give their team enough credit. Tampa Bay is a really good team. Todd Bowles has been awesome. Baker Mayfield's been a wonderful surprise, a lot of fun to watch. But I think the bigger issue for Atlanta, if they're going to make this push, maybe have less to do with Michael Penix Jr. and more to do with those defensive guys they drafted and finally getting after it and creating pressure, because your defense can carry you a long way, even if your offense is struggling early in the season.